And welcome back to TIA 2014, day 3 of our 3-day conference on the Network of the Future in Dallas, Texas. With us in the Dell TI Now studio is Tim Horan. He's Communications and Cloud Analyst at Oppenheimer. And Tim, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. You bring a whole new component and perspective, if you will, to the conference, and I'm excited to talk about that, at least for a short time today.
Great.
Thank you very much. As you know, Tim, there's a reticence on the part of investors on Wall Street to invest in small, medium, and large size carriers, and that's because of the lack of maybe education about those particular companies, but also some reticence and some apprehension about the future of those companies. Why is that the case right now?
Well, there's an enormous amount of change going on, particularly with the business models. Historically, the carriers would charge for specific applications like voice calls. You would charge per minute for long distance calls, and now on a monthly rate for voice, and also for video. You would charge kind of a monthly package and get a full broadcast of video, but things are changing rapidly. Now voice is becoming an application on top of the internet. You see WhatsApp with texting, and they're going to have a voice product for wireless. We've seen on video, you have Netflix out there. And you've seen companies like Google do extremely well, Facebook do extremely well, and they don't have to invest in the network. So carriers are like, well, why don't investors are like, why don't I invest in those stocks where there's not a lot of capital investment, there's been a lot of growth, where these stocks there's a lot of uncertainty, they have to deploy a lot more investment, and it's not really clear how they're going to get a payback on that investment.
Tim, of course, there are ways to educate Wall Street investors about the telecom industry. One of those ways is TIA's Financial Analyst Conference that's going to be on October 8th and 9th of this year. Is that right?
Correct. At our offices in New York at 85 Broad Street. Yeah.
And tell me about the conference. Tell me about the setup. Tell me about your experience in putting that together, or at least assisting TIA in putting that together.
Yeah, it was TIA's idea. They felt there could be an audience for the type of conferences that they put on, and I completely agree with. We're going to have, for the first year, a fairly small conference, I think 100, 125 participants. We're going to have kind of 3 primary panels, and we want to have a kind of a whole mix of different type of companies on those panels, from technology companies to traditional equipment suppliers, software suppliers, and some of the carriers. And Wall Street does not do a very good job of kind of mixing together different companies from different industries onto one kind of panel. And also Wall Street doesn't do a great job taking some of the longer term view, kind of a 3 to 5 year view. Oftentimes it's much more short term. So I think the hope here is, and one thing I got out of this conference over the last few days, is there's a huge amount of innovation occurring. So one of the concerns is we have this kind of tenfold increase in traffic over the next 5 to 8 year period. How does the industry kind of put up, how does the industry meet that kind of demand out there? And then, so that's going to be one panel, kind of the network of the future. The second panel will be, how do we monetize that, maybe from new apps or new features of functionality, new forms of content that might come out that the carriers can participate in. And then the third panel will be a little bit more specifically focused on the cloud. And I think the industry has an enormous opportunity to kind of integrate the network with computing and with storage on more of an infrastructure basis, and to be able to kind of charge for that.
Tim, you talked about monetization for carriers. And when you have companies out there like Amazon and Facebook that have such a high market cap, how do these carriers compete with that?
Well, I think the network, they can have a lot of differentiation, and there's a lot of information that they have that they can monetize that information, just like Google has a huge amount of information that they monetize. And I think the world trusts carriers. I think they trust them with their privacy, and I think privacy is going to become a bigger and bigger issue. And then unique content. I think you've seen Verizon, they have the NFL package for smartphones. I think you see AT&T trying to do with DirecTV. They want to push television and content directly down to iPads and phones and many other devices, and hopefully then create some unique content. And clearly a lot of the internet companies have been doing that. Netflix have some of their own shows that have gone fairly well. You have obviously Amazon now starting to create some of their own content.
Tim, are there other conferences out there that are educating Wall Street investors? And if so, where does TIA fit into that?
Well, there are many Wall Street conferences out there. They're usually run by brokerage houses like ourselves. So this is the first time I think we really have a joint venture with an industry association like this. And one of the first times where we're taking a little bit more of a longer term view. And we want to have kind of this small intimate atmosphere, because after each breakout session, we're going to have more individual small meetings to kind of discuss some of these issues in a lot more detail. And there is clearly a huge amount of opportunity even for the industry to use new technologies like software-defined networks to get their costs down and be able to bring products to market much more rapidly. And that was another major takeaway I had the last 2 days.
Do you think, based on, I guess, the results of this conference, that communication gap between these Wall Street guys and the telecom guys will narrow? Or do you think kind of innately there's that communication gap just by nature of the different sectors?
Well, Wall Street's always looking for secular changes and new opportunities, and I think we are, and they want to be early in those investments. And I think we are seeing secular changes in the business models, and I think secular changes in how the networks are going to be built and run over the next 10, 20 years. And I think there is a huge amount of opportunity. The question is, we don't really know who the winners and losers are going to be. On the equipment side, clearly companies that have software or applications that are very unique, I think are going to win. Clearly, if carriers can have very low-cost transport for wireless services or unique transport, those carriers are going to win too. I think we've seen in the United States the cable companies with high broadband speeds have had very successful business models. We've seen some of the carriers like AT&T and Verizon with very, very high quality wireless networks have had very good returns on invested capital. The question is, where's the next kind of leg of growth coming from, and what kind of unique applications can they really generate, as long with kind of keeping their costs down.
Tim, TI Now and our crew will be there to cover that event. We hope to talk to you then as well.
Great, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Tim. And thank you for joining us live for our coverage of TIA's Network of the Future conference. You can view our live stream and all of our programming at tianow.org. So long.